Rev up your engines!
Zap says, do you recommend top-tier gas, or does any local station have enough additives? Thanks. Top tier, a lot of that, it's just the words, right? Almost any place you live in the United States, the gasoline you buy comes from only one refinery. Doesn't matter if there's 5 different types of stations where you are. They all generally get the gas from the same refinery. Then theoretically, each individual company puts additives into that gasoline before they sell it to you. So basically, it's the same stuff. And in the United States, gasoline has to meet certain mandatory minimum additives. So they all have a certain amount of additives anyways. My experience is, you buy any name brand, it's fine. Now, personally, I stay away from some station that doesn't even have a name on it. Maybe he's got water in his gas tank, he doesn't take care of it, who knows? If you stick to the bigger companies, at least then, if something screws up and they have water in the gas or something goes wrong, the big company can pay for it. If you're going to some dirt water little gas station in the middle of nowhere and something goes wrong, good luck getting them to pay for a problem because the gas was bad. Boyd Muskie said, Scotty, my wife and I are thinking of getting either a Toyota Corolla or Camry Hybrid. Which would you recommend? We have one toddler and plan on having a second child. Well, nowadays, everybody gotta have this. They gotta have that, right? They gotta have everything. 2 strapping sons I had, and they rode around in an old 81 Toyota Corolla 4-door, and it worked perfectly fine, right? The Camrys have a lot more room and are more comfortable. What do you want to spend? They're both excellent cars. What do you want to spend? A Corolla costs an awful lot less, but the Camry rides a lot smoother. So that would be your decision on what you're going to do. But like I said, 2 strapping sons I had, and they rode around most of their growing up ages in an 81 Toyota Corolla 4-door, and it ran perfectly fine and got us all over the country with no problems whatsoever. Kenneth M. says, I got a 2002 Lincoln LS8 that keeps displaying gear select data error. Do you know what it might be? Okay, the simplest thing, and it usually is automatic transmission cable goes to the transmission. There's a unit there, clicks it into the different gears, and it tells the computer what gear you're in. That's usually what goes wrong. You buy the whole thing, it just bolts off, you bolt another one on. The internal switches break, and then the computer doesn't know what gear you're in, and that's all that unit that's on the transmission that the cable bolts onto. I change that 99% of the time. That'll fix your problem. If it doesn't, you'd have some kind of computer problem or some kind of internal electric failure in the transmission, but usually it's just that unit that just bolts off and bolts on, the cable connects to it, right on the transmission. Brittany says, if I change my knock sensor, will the lifters quiet down? No, it has nothing to do with the lifters. The lifters open and close the valves. The lifters, if they're worn, and they're physically worn, you're going to have to replace them to get rid of noise. Or, say they're really dirty and filled with crud, you could get a good engine flush, like Bernie's ATS engine flush from Albuquerque. You could flush the system out, and if the noise of the lifters go away, great. Sludge was inside made to make noise. If it doesn't, you're either going to drive it the way it is, or you're going to have to take the engine apart and replace the lifters. And replacing lifters on some cars can cost well over $1,000. It can get super expensive. That's why you want to try to clean them first. Jay Daly says, I got a 2013 Honda Civic. When I turn left or right, I hear a scraping noise. Any ideas? First thing, pull your front wheels off. Look at your brake pads. Probably just the brake pads are wearing down to the metal, and it'll scrape when you turn because there's a little more torque, and it'll hit the rotors and make a scraping noise, okay? So check that first. Also, on the inside of each of the brakes is a dust backing plate. Sometimes they get bent, and then when you turn, they rub against the rotors, and all you got to do is bend them back. They're thin metal. You can get a little screwdriver, pry them, and they stop scraping. That's the most common thing. Now, I mean, if you've got a worn-out strut and it's bouncing around, and then you turn and hit something, lots of things can theoretically do it, but normally it's a simple thing like the brake pads are worn out or the brake packing dust shield has gotten bent and it's touching the rotor when you turn. So check that first. You pull out the wheels. It's kind of obvious then. You can spin them and see where that scrapes. And if the brake pads are real thin, you know it's the brake pads. Jeff Man says, please answer, what's your thoughts on the Saturn Astra 5-speed hatchback? Saturn's out of business. It was GM and they just tried to make it something else. GM got mad because people thought, the Saturns are better than ours, and they started taking the labor force from the Saturn and putting it on GM and taking some of their bad workers from GM factories and moving them to the Saturn factory, and they screwed the whole thing up, right? A 5-speed standard is the best kind you can get, right? The problem is they don't make them anymore. So as time goes on, you're not going to be able to get parts for the stupid thing. Now, you can probably get one relatively cheap if it still runs good and the transmission doesn't slip when you're going through the gears and you're not paying much. It could be a good knockaround car, right? But don't overpay for a car they don't make anymore because they're not worth much. They're hard to get parts for. A lot of guys don't want to work on them. So if it could be a good second car, knockaround car, if you can get it cheap enough. but don't overpay because, hey, they Saturn failed for a reason. Nevada Maverick said, would you be willing to be the Secretary of Transportation? No, because it's a political hack job, and I'm not a political hack. So, let's face the facts. All those jobs are political hack jobs. They give them to people who've been sucking rear ends their whole life in the party. Now it's Democrats. Then when it's Republicans, it's the Republicans. And they don't know what's going on. They have no idea what should be run. And it's just a political hack job. That's how all those things are. Somebody gets, just like people who become diplomats and, they're the ambassador to Guyana or something. It's just a political hack job. People go to parties all the time and hoi polloi with rich people and bleh. I'd never want to get involved in any of that crap. Ken says, what are your recommendations to make a regular gas vehicle have long-term indoor storage 3 to 6 months in a winter climate? Okay, hopefully you have electricity, like in a garage where you're storing it. Trickle charger that activates the battery. You can get these things for $30. So the electrical system will be stable, right? You don't want to have a gas tank that's almost empty because the air will oxidize things. Before you put it away, fill it to the top with regular gasoline. Then there's less air involved that won't degrade your gasoline as fast. It's just like a bottle of pop. You open it up. If it's a screw top, if you drink half of it, or even more than half, and screw it back on and put it back in, it's going to go flat anyways because all that air is in there. Same thing. You want to keep the tires full of air. Pretty much that's what you'd be doing with a modern car. 3 to 6 months sitting there. You don't want the electrical system to go down. You want the tires to be full of air, and you want the gas tank full of gas. Now, if you can't get a trickle charger, my advice would be to just disconnect the battery and then recharge it and connect it when you start the car up again, because you don't want to leave it there. It will drain itself running a computer system for 3 to 6 months. That's why you really want a trickle charger, to keep it trickling while you're just sitting there not using it. Seller says, Scotty, what's the trick to reset the airbag light on the 92 Camry OBD1 that had the battery disconnected for 3 days? All right, here's the thing. If that light is on for the airbag, odds are you got a problem. It doesn't matter if you even have the equipment I have to turn it off. It's going to come right back on again. And those OBD1, they're not very complex cars, right? You can only get so much information out of them. I have equipment that will plug into the Toyota plug and get some information on the airbag system. You're not going to have it. The thing costs thousands of dollars, right? My advice would be find a guy like me, have a machine, and have him plug it in and see what it says. Could be you got a bad airbag sensor somewhere that's tripping. It could be a lot of things. But there's really nothing you're going to be able to do. If you wanted to try yourself, just disconnect the battery. You said you disconnected it for 3 days. You disconnect it for 3 days, and then you put it back on and the light's still on. It's not going to reset itself. You're going to have to see what the problem is. And then when you find what it is on a 92 camera, you'll probably just live without it and realize, well, the airbags aren't going to work. I'll use a seatbelt. And anyways, the airbags, you're going to trust it to even work? Airbags are explosive mixture of stuff. They're supposed to pop when the rack gets in. You think it's going to work after 32 years? I don't think it's going to. I always put my seatbelts on. I don't trust them. Now here's an interesting idea. This is a giant DC charger called a 500 kilowatt DC charger. It's the size of 2 home chargers, and it's supposed to be made for people who live in urban areas so that the condos can have a place where people can charge their electric cars. It's called Distributed Energy Access Point, DIA. They can have up to a 500-foot cable. You think, oh, wow, great, 500-foot cable. You'll pull it around, right? But if you know anything about electricity, you're putting all that DC power, going to overheat the cable. So these are liquid-cooled cables. They have their own cooling system. Let's see. What could possibly go wrong with that? 500 feet of liquid cooling. That crap's going to break, right? I mean, it's interesting technology, but in the real world, how long is this liquid cooling thing going to last? And how much money is it going to cost? Now, the guys that are making that, they're even admitting, they're saying, this isn't for your house at home. Unless you're a billionaire to pay for all this stuff, right? And of course, you can imagine if it's got a 500-foot cable, what a rat's nest that'd be of people fighting over who gets the cable now, pull it over here, run over there. And if it's 500 feet long, people are going to run over it where they're driving around the parking lot, right? Probably break the cooling system in it. I could see so many problems with this design. It would make your head spin. And of course, it all comes down to, if you know anything about the history of electricity, DC can't go too far or it overheats. DC's got a whole flowing. You got to have positive, negative, right? AC is just alternating back and forth. So it doesn't heat the wires up like DC does. So, the idea that, DC charging is faster because cars have DC batteries in them, right? But there's a lot of things that are wrong with DC, and this is one of them. You got a 500-foot cable, you're going to have it cooled. Hey, that's going to break. Of course, then fires are going to start. I just laugh at it. It's great science fiction, but when you put it in the real world, it leaves a lot to be desired. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.